All right, welcome to another Catholic Reflection. Today we have a real treat. We will be discussing Buddhism with Alex. So it's kind of a first look into what Buddhism is, and we'll be exploring certain concepts, particularly in view of finding points of connection and commonality. And so with that, Alex, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so Alex and I know each other through Twitch. He is a legend Hearthstone player, and we got talking about his past. So I want to start off with um, inviting you, Alex, to describe your journey a little bit, how you grew up, um, some things you've experienced, and how Buddhism fell into your lap.
Oh, I would love to answer. Those are terrific questions. So, the first thing that comes to mind is I was raised Greek Orthodox. So, my mom was Greek Orthodox and my father is Russian Orthodox. So, they are Christian. So, I was raised Christian. However, the churches that we would go to growing up really did not speak much, if any, English. So a lot of the church services that I would attend growing up, I had no idea what the priest was saying. The chanting was lovely, the smells of the incense was fantastic, uh, but I didn't know really anything that they were saying. Uh, so my mom, we went to church every Sunday with my mom. My dad, on the other hand, was and still is the strongest atheist that I could possibly imagine. So it was an interesting upbringing, to say the least. I ended up going to Notre Dame High School, a Catholic high school. And, well, I never really fell in love with uh, the traditional the three Abrahamic religions, I believe they would be Judaism, Christianity, Islam. They never really found their way into my soul. So COVID came, and I found myself there was this meditation on YouTube, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I played it at various sections. Sorry, forgive me if you could hear my dog shaking in the background there. I played this meditation, right, at several points, and I heard silence at every point. And I thought, what is this, right? And I look at the comments, and they're all saying how wonderful this meditation is. And I'm just flabbergasted. Like, what in the world is it? What is this mystery, right? Because I can only hear silence whenever I listen at specific periods in the meditation. So it's maybe 25 minutes long. I during COVID, I sit down, I listen to it, and it's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. It is a guided meditation by a man named Thich Nhat Hanh, who very famous throughout history. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King Jr. for protesting the Vietnam War. He's apparently this very famous Buddhist monk, right? Thich Nhat Hanh. And
Don't you
the
know
more
that
I
I
listened to him, the more I was drawn into his
love you
messages.
in a
One in particular was
car,
making me
baby?
aware of how
Don't
much
you know?
entertainment I am
Don't you know that
consuming,
I
and
love
just opening up
you
my eyes to
in a
that alone
car,
was startling. How, boy, my whole life I'm
Don't you
constantly
know?
consuming entertainment, whether it's in the form of podcasts, sports, you name it. So that was my introduction to Buddhism, was that meditation that I gave a chance, and it ended up being beautiful. It introduced me to Buddhism, and it really found its way into my life that way.
Oh, very good. Um, I do recall in a previous message that you said that Buddhism is more focused on orthopraxy as opposed to orthodoxy. And I was curious, though, um, as far as orthodoxy is concerned, are there certain things that most or all Buddhists believe that make it Buddhism as opposed to something else?
I would say certainly. The most glaring response that I should give here would be the core teachings of Buddhism. They are the Four Noble Truths, which I meant to have in front of me before this interview, because I believe it or not, I really should have them memorized. I get the gist of them. So they are the Four Noble Truths. They really detail how humans suffer, because that is actually we could spend a long time, you and me, Chambers, here, and everyone else, discussing suffering and what is suffering and what causes it. So a lot of the human condition of suffering is explored, or at least introduced, in the Four Noble Truths, that hey, there is suffering out there in the world, and we really do go through it. And there are causes for this suffering, and there are ways for us to escape this pattern of suffering. So that's the gist of the Four Noble Truths, all dealing with suffering. And the Noble Eightfold Path is 8 different things that we can do and practice, pretty much good habits, really, that if we do them, supposedly our suffering will, I don't want to say vanish, because suffering never vanishes, but we can work with it like a sculptor works with clay to almost transform it into something else, really. I hope that answers your question, and feel free to hit me with more. This is fantastic. I love these questions.
Yes. In fact, I was looking at the Four Noble Truths, and it says that suffering arises from craving and attachment, including desires for pleasure, existence, and non existence. And I was wondering, does Buddhism um, make distinctions between or categorize different types of suffering? Because based on this definition, or at least how it's described in this particular point, is that it doesn't really distinguish. Like, for example, when I was 10 years old, my father shot himself. And this caused a lot of trauma. It caused me to unravel and spiral out of control for about a decade in my life. So that, in my mind, is a form of suffering that I had to endure at the hands of my father's will, basically at the hands of reality. So does Buddhism make distinctions between types of suffering that is self-imposed, that we bring upon ourselves due to cravings and attachments, versus those things that happen to us that are outside of our control?
Wow. How to respond to that? I wish I could go back and give 10-year-old you a humongous hug.
Right.
That is an unspeakable tragedy. I could not imagine. Boy, so that's heartbreaking to hear. First off, um, okay, wow. I did not know that about you. Actually, that's it. So the best way I can answer the question as it pertains to the Buddhism aspect there is, I think the best way would probably be, I think it's known as some kind of teaching known as the second arrow. I've heard it in a group locally, referred to as the second arrow principle, maybe. But what it is there are definitely things that happen in life which are all kinds of horrendous, right? Horrific, tragic,
Oh yeah.
heartbreaking. Uh, well, and in Buddhism, we oftentimes refer. Let me think of how we refer to them as old age, sickness, and death. Those are universal ways in which humans suffer, right? So losing things, right? A lot of times will cause tremendous suffering. Just to name one example, right? That's not the right example to go with, though. Let me go with a different example. Let me go with a very regular daily life example. Right? Let's say someone cuts me off on the road, and that is an event that happens that is upsetting. Just a regular daily event that is upsetting. It could be anything. It could be anything in the world. But let's just go with this example because it deals with someone else causing this to us, really. Which is debatable, of course, whether they cause it, but that's a different thing. So we have this event that causes us to feel suffering, right? This whatever you want to call anger, sadness, rage, some kind of negative emotion, right? And that is our natural reaction in the moment. That, from what I've learned from Buddhism, it's actually very healthy to be aware of that natural reaction, no matter how negative it is. It's very important to just accept where we are for peace. So let's say we're very reactive, and oh man, that jerk, that should be an appropriate word here. Oh, that jerk, who cut me off, right? Oh man, look at me get. Oh, I've gotten angry, right? So that person cut me off. That was enough for me to be upset. That's the first arrow. But then the second arrow is what I deliver onto myself. Like, yeah, that person was a bit of a jerk, right, for cutting me off, and maybe I would have suffered a tragic accident. They put me at risk. Shame on them. They should be acting better, right? But for me to go down that road of then adding on to my suffering and almost compounding it, what if I start fantasizing about that other person and how I want to gain revenge on them? Well,
Right.
that would be a second arrow. What if I want to gain revenge on whomever? Well, these are all ways in which we amplify ours. We almost cause our suffering. Yeah, it's fine to suffer in the first aspect, right? Because something terrible has happened to us. A lot of the time, we deserve to heal and feel that pain, right? We need that to heal. But then what are we causing that's making it almost worse? That's causing more problems? That would be my best day. I'm sorry it took me so long to say that. And I'm not very concise, but I'm trying.
No, that's good because the concept of suffering, I think, is something that is definitely universally experienced and part of the reality in which we live in. I would say, most major religions have an approach or an understanding of the nature of suffering, its causes, its role that gets played in our life. For the sake of my viewers, to connect with this is that suffering is one of the key concepts of within Catholicism, which is why I definitely wanted to touch upon suffering because it seems to be a central theme um, of
Yeah.
Buddhism. Is okay, there's suffering. What do we do with it? Um, so, so as far as I think you with the first and second arrow that you were describing, there does seem to be some categorization of different sufferings. Like you mentioned, everybody will either like die or
Yeah.
suffer disease, and
Yeah.
these things aren't caused because of attachment or desire. We could, for example, um, overwhelm ourselves with the fear of death by being too attached to life and not being able to let go of our ego and not being able to let go of temporal things. It's the idea of, naked I came into this world and naked I leave. Right? Uh,
Yeah.
it's in a sense, in that moment of death is the ultimate moment of relinquishment of self. There's kind of like an abandonment of self to the moment and the process where we hopefully do not increase our suffering by begrudgingly holding on with every ounce of will to life, as opposed to resigning ourselves to that moment, giving ourselves to it, right? Um, so that makes sense to me. So it seems like from what you're saying, the Four Noble Truths touches more upon those types of suffering that's a result of our cravings and attachments and desires. Um,
And
and
delusion is a good word to use there, and it's not a word that I use as a way to put anyone down, quite frankly,
mhm.
because I am fully enraptured in it as well. This word called delusion, unfortunately, and that's part of being human, is, well, making mistakes and learning, quite frankly. Just yeah. Uh, there are aspects of excuse me, one second, Chambers. There's one thing I want to say about suffering, real quick, before we turn the page.
Sure.
I've been getting into Zen Buddhism recently. So, which I should say, there are different schools of Buddhism, but inherent within Buddhism is the idea that we should respect other religions. You really should never hear one school say we're better than another school. For example, Thich Nhat Hanh, my Buddhist teacher, said Jesus was a Buddha. That is, like, in my opinion, the highest compliment he could give. Um, Jesus. So, but I want to say one thing about Zen Buddhism. Just they describe suffering in a very different way, actually. They would just simply say, thinking is suffering. Done. Just thinking. So Zen Buddhism, it would focus all about the here and the now. Just forget about language, even. Zen Buddhism tries to even escape words, the English language, tries to free us from that, even to experience life outside of words, which is a thing I'm just starting to explore as a student. One other topic I just want to bring up, Chambers, just to address it. There are different kinds of suffering in Buddhism. Yes. Unfortunately, I wish I knew more to actually tell you these are the different kinds of suffering that we go through. There are names for them. One of them is called dukkha, dukkha. That same word repeated twice. That's a specific form of suffering. Unfortunately, I'm more of a student, not a teacher. So that would be a job for Google. And I'm sorry to interrupt you here, Chambers. I just wanted to hit a couple of those notes for anyone who might be interested in tying up those ends.
No, because that's fine. Because I think there does exist within Catholicism a parallel to everything that you've said concerning suffering, and that one can be too attached to something where it's unhealthy, right?
Yes.
One can resist resigning themselves to something that they don't have control over. It kind of reminds me of the serenity prayer that is used in 12 step programs. It's the Lord, help me to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Chambers, would you believe the Serenity Prayer came up at the dog park just this very morning in my life as I was speaking with another, actually very, very kind, very wise man, actually. He was amazing. The Serenity Prayer came up.
Oh,
Yeah. And he was saying how that keeps him peaceful. And I completely agreed. It's wonderful to try and change, not get lost in the things we can't really change or control. Yeah, it's wonderful you bring that up. I love it.
yeah, because I think that the last line complements the first two in that yes, there are things or self-imposed suffering. All right, to go back to the Four Noble Truths, that there are things that we do to ourselves. It kind of reminds me in psychology the idea of early scripting, right? So as children, we have we created these scripts and unhealthy circumstances that we carry on, things that we tell ourselves, right? Um, because
Wow.
sometimes we're not very nice to ourselves. We don't give ourselves enough credit, or we give ourselves too much credit. We come to believe we have a certain measure of control over things that can happen, like someone uh, who experiences trauma, who makes promises to themselves that I will never allow this to happen to myself again, for example, but in such an unhealthy manner that it leads them to an
Oh
overly
boy.
sense of control over things that happen to them, right? Which is only going to lead them to be re traumatized when they experience something that goes against their perception that they've been telling themselves all these years, right? So there's a kind of I know it's often a very popular idea among those influenced by Eastern religion is that there's a kind of true self underneath these layers of ego and scripting and these false kinds of concepts about oneself that we have to chisel away. Yes.
Chambers, have you heard of Buddha nature by any chance? Because that's what it's called in Buddhism. We all have a Buddha nature. Have you heard of this by any chance?
By no, I haven't. Could you explain what Buddha nature means?
That that's what it's called in Buddhism. That what you were just talking about, unraveling or unveiling our true self. Well, everyone has what's called Buddha nature, which is imagine being free from this attachment. A word we use in Buddhism. Again, this is not meant to be. These words are not judgmental because they're really meant to illustrate the human condition, things we are all victim to or feeling. These are the three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. So they mean, and there are also different translations for these three poisons, but they do come up oftentimes. Uh, Also, to be totally frank, I have no idea where I was going with this. I completely forgot my thread here. I was talking about greed, but I forgive me, Chambers. I don't remember where I was going with this. I lost myself.
Well, that's fine. The context was that there could be this false self that we've built over the years.
Right. Buddha nature. Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, it's a little hard for me to define Buddha nature. Yeah, but it's really, you were talking about the early scripting. Yeah. I would like to actually get back to that and hopefully tie it into Buddha nature, which is, you're right. We do tell ourselves things, and we do most certainly undergo, I think, eventually some really terrible things in life. Whether or not how traumatic they are is, I don't know. But uh, we will oftentimes develop habits in order for us to cope and survive. And sometimes I had a therapist once say, if you're drowning, sometimes you choose a life raft that has spikes. uh, so, Buddhism, and this actually doesn't necessarily just apply to Buddhism, it could also apply to yoga, comes to mind, or just the practice of so many different things, any hobby. That Buddhism, for me personally, gives me the time to simply sit with my thoughts, look inward, meditating pretty much, so that I can become more aware of those bad habits. Now, I say bad habits, right? They're habits I've picked up over time. Maybe using the word bad might not be the best word there, but I think we know what we mean, right? That, oh boy, maybe I'm really not doing a good enough job listening to other people, right? Maybe that's a habit that I can. So it gives me time to look inward. Because so this is the thing, a lot of us, especially in the West, we're so busy. We, we do one thing after the next. And while we're doing one thing, we're thinking about doing five or 10, or we want to do so many things that we don't have enough time. And so this Buddha nature idea is, what if we do give ourselves that time to simply rest and stop what we're doing, to rest, to actually calm ourselves and to heal. Those four words are very important for getting back to Buddha nature, and they are stop, calm, rest, heal. Pretty much the busyness of life stops us from enjoying life. We think we're enjoying. This is the thing. We think we're enjoying life, right? Because we have 50 million things we want to do, and we're getting them all. We are consuming, baby. Ooh, we are consuming, and we love it. But that's the thing. If you stop, if you rest, if you calm yourself, and if you heal, you might get more in touch with that Buddha nature. Start to see things for how they really are. What if, imagine, I know I'm going on and on here, but this is a good point here. You know how a Venus flytrap, when a fly or bug, whatever, comes around, the Venus flytrap, I don't know if this is the right example, but it'll automatically just snap closed without even thinking, just intrinsically. Or maybe the better idea would be some kind of lizard that sticks its tongue out at a fly, just instantly. Bloop. That's how humans are a lot of the times now with consuming entertainment. We just, blam, I just want that, bang, because it's all at the tips of our fingers now. All right, I'm going to stop myself. I can keep going.
That's a fascinating idea because what you're describing is instinct, and I think as humans, bodily, we certainly have certain habituated behaviors that are learned, but we also have instincts, such as if you put your hand on a hot stove, you're going to have this instinctual reflex to pull it away, right? But we also have this instinct to gravitate towards maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. And what's interesting is that we are actually called to pursue even greater goods than these kinds of things. And in fact, sometimes the the best good for ourselves is to either deny ourselves of pleasure or to embrace something that might be painful, like maybe somebody's engaging in fasting, right? So they're depriving themselves, but they're embracing something that might be painful that's contrary to instinct. And we experience this kind of conflict between our will that continually feels drawn by the instinct, but yet we continue by means of our intellect to will above and beyond these things because we can perceive a greater good that is beyond the mere instinct.
there's there's a lot there that I was thinking as you were saying there that I would love to comment on. One is, actually, I would even like to share a little subtitle here, which is "The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching" by my teacher Thich Nhat Hanh. The subtitle is "Transforming Suffering into Peace, Joy, and Liberation." So we're talking now about avoiding pain. Now, certain pains, of course, can be truly severe. So perhaps those are not necessarily what we're talking about here. This is more, I really want to focus more on just the everyday life things that humans go through. I'm not really necessarily talking about the most extreme forms of trauma here, because that is a whole other topic that, I mean, I think medical professionals really need. I'm not a medical professional, right? So I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just someone who's trying to get through life, like I'm sure a lot of other people out there. uh, but one comment though that's worth mentioning on this avoiding pain and seeking pleasure is transforming suffering. Well, what are we even suffering about? Do we even give ourselves time to allow ourselves to feel the suffering? Or well, I know I would always distract myself with entertainment, podcasts in particular.
Yeah.
Uh, So, transforming suffering, what if instead we try and look at our anger, look at our fear, look at our jealousy, our desire for material item. What about what about an item? Always, a lot of times it's items. Like I have a little lion, a beanie baby lion from my elementary school from the 90s. I can't throw it away because it was the lion. That was our mascot, from elementary school. It's not worth anything, but it's just such a part of when I was 9 years old, right? But that kind of attachment, right? If I look deeply, right? If I allow myself the time to just sit with myself and say, boy, that lion really means a lot to me. Well, it's just an item, like I will always have that love in my heart. The item is it's just something to hold, you know? Um, but having the strength to look inward and maybe one day get rid of the lion. Who knows? Who knows? That's the way of being free, though. That is the way to be free, apparently, according to Buddhism. Look inward at your suffering. Try and examine it with the way a parent would hold an injured child or a sick child. You know how a parent, would just hold that child with so much love in the world? Like, that's how we're supposed to treat our own suffering, to try and heal. But we have to be aware, and that's like the practice of meditation and awareness, mindfulness.
Sure. So I'll conclude with a comment about suffering, and then we can move into meditation. Because Catholicism was very attractive to me personally, and hearing more about Buddhism, I could see how I would be attracted to that as well, given the amount of suffering that I have endured in my own personal life. Um, but the idea of having a kind of resignation to suffering is really encapsulated in the. I know this is more about me at the moment, but I'm trying to make connections. The Passion of Christ, um, who took on all kinds of different sorts of suffering, and embraced those, and whereby suffering becomes redemptive now. Like human suffering has been infused with redemptive purpose. That when we suffer, if it's self-imposed, it teaches us something about ourselves that we can correct. If it's something that we can't control, it's something that can give shape to us as well. So it has a very effective kind of nature to it, and it's something that where the problem of avoiding pain at all costs. See, I think that there's a certain healthy measure of avoidance of pain. Obviously, we're not going to force ourselves to keep our
Mm-hmm.
hands on the hot stove, but it's the at all
Yeah.
costs that is going to cause people severe problems. Now, with meditation
Yeah.
or mindfulness or a kind of being cognizant of ourselves and be able to shut off all the messaging of the world, close out the noise of the city, and be in a room with ourselves and be able to really dig down into ourselves to discover who we really are apart from our scripting, apart from what people tell us, how people treat us, knowing that who we are is not defined by these things. Right? Things that happen to me don't define who I am because I was already who I was before those events ever occurred. Right? So in Buddhism, um, does meditation take on the character of being? Because you mentioned you've mentioned both mindfulness, but you've also mentioned moving beyond thought, or at least in terms of Zen
Mm,
Buddhism.
yeah.
So in Buddhism, is meditation an exercise of deeply contemplating something specific, or is the purpose of it to empty the mind?
Thank you so much for asking that. 'Cause there is so much misconception. One thing I guess there's so much I want to say. Boy, so apparently I heard recently by my Zen Buddhist teacher that only 5% of Buddhists around the world meditate. Again, only 5% of Buddhists around the world meditate. That is the statistic that our teacher just shared with us this past Sunday. Now,
It's not.
he
It's not just.
actually just,
It's not just a Buddhism. People are lazy.
uh, let's see, he mentioned how Buddhism, it originated, in certain lands, and eventually it was packaged somehow to the West. And you'll have real, Buddhists trying to share their way of life with Westerners. And what aspects of Buddhism would they share back in the day? Well, there was the supernatural aspect, which is reincarnation, that idea, which is something that I personally don't really focus on. So I'm like the typical American. We don't focus so much on the supernatural aspects of Buddhism. We tend to focus and are drawn more to the meditation aspects. That was the packaging that was delivered to the West, was try yoga, try meditating, because these things will help you relax. You seem very stressed and overworked. uh, Boy, indeed. Hey, this meditating thing actually makes me feel calmer and more relaxed, and I can even do my job better. Now, that's one thing, which is it was packaged, right, with meditating to the West. Now, there are two types of meditating, about two, I would say. Maybe there are more, I don't know. But there are two types. One is focused concentration, which you nailed. That is when you focus deeply on just one question. One question that I have been tasked with focusing deeply on, focused meditation, is the question, what is this? So, pretty much every minute of the day, I'm supposed to ask this question, what is this? Assuming I'm not driving, assuming I'm not saving someone's life, right? Assuming no emergencies are going on, of course. But that's focused concentration. The other meditation might be something like observational meditation, something like that, where you simply just observe whatever pops up into your mind. And so it's not about emptying the mind. That is the misconception. It's it's impossible to empty the mind. Our brain will always come up with thoughts. Hey, I'm looking at something blue. That's some even of colors, right? I'm looking at a water bottle. I'm looking at my mug. I'm holding it, right? Our brain will naturally come up with thoughts. But being aware that, hey, I am holding this mug, as opposed to being mindless. Now, what would mindlessness look like? Well, that's me watching television while I'm on my phone and I have an iPad out and I'm eating food and I'm talking to a friend and I'm thinking about my dog and I'm worried about that. Like, so when our mind is in 10 different places at the same time, pretty much, that is, well, that would be the opposite of mindfulness when we're so scatterbrained that we're just bouncing. We don't know what we're doing. We're doing all kinds of stuff. We have no idea that we're drinking water right now. It's like we're drinking water, but we don't know we're drinking water. We're living life, but we don't know we're living life. we're with our friends, but we don't know we're with our friends. It hits me in my heart because this is how people live. And we could, if we were more aware. Boy, I'm getting emotional. If we were more aware, this is why it matters to me. If we were more aware that we are with our loved ones, we would we would be better loved ones for them. And they would turn around and they would be better versions of themselves. So the most powerful thing in Buddhism is I don't do it for me. I do it for people around me. Thank you. All right, I'm going to press the eject button there. But yeah, it's real. That's real emotion right there. It does mean a lot to me.
Most excellent. Yeah. I understand what you mean. I go through very similar kinds of questions of myself. Um, as as a Catholic, God is all good and deserving of all my love, and sometimes and not just God, but other people are deserving of my love as well. And love is not just mere sentiment; it's like an act of the will. It's like you said, we uh, if we really recognized, you know, something that we would act, we would really love those people around us. We would really take care of them. We would do something for them, um, because we're not just contemplating a concept of self denial or the worthiness of love and intrinsic value and inherent dignity and all of these sorts of things. And yes, we should. I think that's kind of the point of meditation, to confront ourselves. See, we're confronted with the ideas. Um, it's not necessarily like having an intellectual mastery over the concept, although that's well and good. It's the being confronted by the concept itself that reveals something to us about ourselves. And it's a real heartfelt thing because I know that I don't step outside of myself enough to to live according to my conscience better. Like, and I kind of think that's the outgrowth of people who do engage in meditation, is that we begin to experience this um, bifurcation, this dichotomy between what we've come to understand and the not yet having realized the ideal, right? Without, it's like we've grasped the concept, it just has not yet been instantiated in reality quite yet. Um, and I kind of think that's maybe one of the points of, say, the eightfold path, is that we're going to recognize that we're not quite living up to our potential, and this should motivate us to drive towards that particular goal. But it's the wrestling with that kind of process that often can be discouraging when we take a look at it. I've always had a very powerful intellect where I can pierce deeply into concepts and grasp things. And at times I've presumed simply being able to circumscribe the limits of a particular concept, that somehow that means that I have arrived, that I have achieved that which I understand. But all I found was the concept confronting me of not being yet what I could. And I need that. I need something that points out to me, no, you're, no, not you, but I'm speaking to myself, that I am struggling with vice, or I engage in self deprivation. I belittle myself. I think
Yeah.
too little of myself. And because I, like we were talking about early scripting before, I didn't recognize it for many, many years. But at some point, because of my father's suicide, I believed that if I were better, if I were exceptional, like some sort of chess prodigy or a genius, that my father would have done something differently, you know, that I could, if I were just different somehow, that I caught his eye and he could live on being proud of me and not be so distracted for himself. That he had something outside of himself that he felt like he could live for, and I really internalized that. I really did. My mom was trying to help me one time, and she said, "If your father was thinking about you, he probably would have done what he did." Now,
Wow.
what she was trying to get at is, I am valuable. The problem was with him. He wasn't thinking of
Wow.
valuable things, but the way I interpreted it is, well, why wasn't I valuable enough for him to think
Oh
about me?
boy.
And so I internalized that. But that's kind of an example of something that through meditation one would be able to recognize what we're doing to ourselves. And that, by me carrying that, is going to cause a great deal of suffering in my own life, because that's
Yeah.
how I'm going to interpret how people are treating me. I deserve to be treated poorly because I'm not worth
Yeah.
being treated well, right? And for people who really internalize that kind of stuff, will even engage in behaviors of self fulfilling prophecy to bring it about, to make
Right.
sure that ultimately people aren't. So they push people away who are very nurturing and very encouraging,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So I think for meditation actually has a very powerful, powerful role in our life. And to hear that, hey, even among Buddhists, only about 5% of them, are engaging the practice, I think just owes to the fact just how difficult it is to look oneself in the mirror.
Mm.
Because
What a terrific response, by the way. Uh, uh, it sounds like you're passionate about psychology, Chambers. Is that fair to say?
well, I know I've spent a great deal amount of time reflecting on such things, but basically everything I've said in the last 48 minutes is really an outgrowth of my study of Catholicism and how I've applied it to myself and
Mm.
my own personal life.
It was really wonderful hearing you speak over the last few minutes. I found myself really just I don't know if this might sound cheesy, but just nodding deeply. Like, boy, that really resonates with me. Like I could really get a sense of what you're saying there, because humans, we do carry the metaphorical crosses, right? I mean, we really carry so many scars that we never know what other people are going through. So if we could figure out a way to heal ourselves, like I was saying earlier, like when I was getting emotional, that strikes a chord with me. That really does. However, whatever ends up being our teacher, like you were saying, our teachers can come in many forms. I'm paraphrasing what you said earlier, but yeah, being open to learning, right, and listening, having our eyes and ears truly open, treating everyone like they are our teacher. It's personally, I find it a wonderful way to live. I think it's very humbling to think that I who knows what I will learn today. Who know I can only live one life after all. Right? Other people are living other lives. Maybe they can teach me a little bit and help me out, and maybe the same vice versa. So, but yeah, like you were saying though, yeah, no, people carry a lot of pain with them, and boy, I can't say thank you enough for having me on tonight, just so that we could talk about this. This is actually what I really want to spend a lot of my life pursuing is how can I help people treat themselves better and treat others better? If I
Mm-hmm.
can do that, then I can go to sleep at night knowing I've left the world a better place.
Yes, I definitely agree. To I'll respond and I'll pivot. We're at the we have about 10 minutes left to our time. Um, oh, I'll just ask a new question. Um, so you had mentioned that because of in Buddhism, there's not necessarily a strong focus on orthodoxy. You did mention that the four uh, noble truths and the eightfold path are is kind of like a universal staple of
Yes.
what distinguishes Buddhism from non-Buddhism. Um, you also mentioned there's different schools, and some, for example, can be a Buddhist but be more of a naturalist. Where ultimate reality consists of matter, motion, space, and time, whereas maybe somebody could be um, a supernaturalist where they
Yeah.
believe that there's something that can exist that's immaterial, is above and beyond nature, and that this it can exist within Buddhism itself, such as maybe with the concept of karma or with reincarnation, particularly, obviously like the in Tibetan Buddhism, you have the Dalai Lama, who is supposedly a continuous reincarnation of a particular great master, and so on and so forth. Um, it, Based on what we've talked about so far, I do I understand it correctly? You more lean towards a more of a natural, non supernatural usage of Buddhism.
I would say certainly. I do have a math and chemistry dual degree, so I do tend to be a bit of the scientist type, as in I do need evidence in order to believe things. That does
Yeah.
tend to be my line of thinking. However, that I am not my father. So, um, thankfully. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Let's see. So there is Theravadan. I believe Theravadan is one school of Buddhism. Another is Mahayanan, that or Mahayana Buddhism. So there are different schools that go by those names. Yeah, I just want to point out though another thing that you and your listeners here, viewers, might find interesting. Zen Buddhism, which is its own school, apparently there's different forms. So Chinese Zen is different than Korean Zen, which is different than Japanese Zen. So it's regional as well. That's just one wrinkle I just wanted to add.
Oh, I gotcha. It does sound like there's quite a bit of variety. Now, I hope that you accept what I'm going to say, not as a criticism, but in all honesty, when I first heard you say the Four Noble Truths and the Eight Way Path, I thought, hey, that's 12 points. It's kind of like, and my mind
Mm,
instantly went to like
wow.
12 step program, that's how I instantly went with it. And as I was reading through all four of those things, there were some very strong parallels between what I understand to be the 12 steps. Because with the 12 steps, a true recognition of reality of self. You know, um, what uh, uh, what our will is sufficient to do and what it can't do. You know, a complete recognition of things that have happened to us in our lives, looking at any shortcomings we may have, things that we might, attachments that we might have, things we might need to rectify, doing a kind of moral inventory, which is, you know, we kind of see that, hey, is my job really like not hurting people, you know, kind of thing. Um,
I'm hearing similarities. That sounds like right livelihood. Gotta try not to be a butcher. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure if you've ever read the 12 steps from Alcoholics Anonymous.
I I have, and I've also read the non-religious version,
Yeah.
but I don't know them by memory. No, I can't recite
Okay.
them. No.
It was the first thing that popped up in my mind, anyways, when it was pointed out to
Ah,
me. So,
wow.
uh, I
Wow.
instantly saw the benefit of, instead of someone being an
Mm,
atheist, somebody being a Buddhist would definitely be a good step forward in terms of, because there's a lot of truth there,
mm.
right? I mean, we've talked for almost for an hour. We come from two different traditions, and I don't think we've really disagreed about anything. I don't see any strong distinctions as of yet. There's a lot of parallels that certainly exist. Um, as far as that goes. But in other words, what I say is that when I read those 12 points, 4 and 8, I instantly saw the value of
Mm.
of Buddhism within that framework, right? Um, uh, Not the supernatural stuff, not like karma or reincarnation, but those 12 things. You know, I instantly saw the benefit of one
Okay.
being a Buddhist in that sense.
So you're fantastic, fantastic things you're saying here. So you're making me I'm reminded wonderfully, I might add, of some fantastic moments that I've had recently gathered and some Buddhist sanghas and chambers. If we do happen to go a few minutes over, it's quite all right because I would like to share this. It
Mm-hmm.
is the that what is actually what is that craving, desire, attachment, and addiction, right? We're kind of talking about all this stuff. Buddhism definitely deals with attachment and craving. Your 12-step program will certainly deal with attachment and craving that's proliferated to the point of addiction. So, yeah, that's amazing. I didn't realize the parallel that should be there, and that is. But let me just specifically target what the heck does Buddhism say about desire and craving? Are there any desires and cravings which are okay, for example? So, and of course, Buddhists are free to disagree. I think that's kind of the thing in Buddhism is everyone's free to their opinion at the end of the day, but as long as you're practicing maybe like loving kindness, understanding, then and you're good enough kind of like maybe that's not exactly 100% accurate, but as long as you're a good person at the end of the day, then as long as you're doing good for the world, then you're sounds like you're doing a good job for a Buddhism. But the desire and craving, we're talking about what is good craving, natural craving. What I've heard that I tend to subscribe to is imagine wanting to have children, imagine wanting to have a family, wanting to fall in love, natural things. Sometimes when you're dirty, you need a shower. Sometimes you need to brush your teeth and you look forward to it, right? Drinking water when you're thirsty. These are natural urges. That's not what Buddhism is talking about for unhealthy attachments and cravings. The unhealthy cravings are what if I am angry behind the wheel of my car? I don't know why it's always cars here. And what if I want to self soothe myself with an unhealthy habit? Say I'm driving home from work, had a bad day. Oh, I want to go gamble. Oh, I want to go. commit adultery. Oh, I want to go commit theft. Oh, I want to go use substances or whatever. Those are the desires and cravings that Buddhism wants us to be aware of. That when we are not doing well mentally, we reach out for poisons to try and help us feel better. That's the desire and craving that Buddhism wants us to be aware of.
You know what's
The
interesting?
unhealthy kinds.
Yeah, as you were thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking that what you're kind of describing parallels to Catholic morality in terms of the seven deadly sins. For example, pride, which is an excessive of self love, considering oneself superior to others, whereas the opposing virtue would be humility, right? Or envy, resenting the good of others and desiring it for oneself. An opposing virtue would be kindness or brotherly love. Or wrath, uncontrolled hatred, resentment, and desire for vengeance. Whereas an opposing virtue would be um, like patience or sloth, or often pronounced sloth, is the kind of spiritual and moral laziness, the negligence of one's duties to God and others. So, 5% of Buddhists engaging in meditation are indeed neglecting the opposing view of virtue of diligence or greed. You've stated explicitly, which is kind of an excessive desire for material wealth or possessions even at the expense of morality, whereas an opposing
Oh, yes.
virtue would be generosity, kind of like a willingness. And then gluttony and overindulgence in food, drink, and material pleasures, whereas an opposing virtue would be temperance or lust, a
Mm.
disordered desire for sexual pleasure, whereas an opposing virtue would be chastity. So I kind of hear that when you're using, or you're talking about these desires or attachments and things, my mind instantly went to these kind of cardinal sins, because all sins can really be categorized as something flowing from one of these, these
And we
vices.
tend to know when we're committing them,
Oh, yeah.
but we like to cover it up that we committed it. Whether, oh, I did this thing, let me not think of it. Let me distract myself with who knows what. Uh, I just want to point out one thing. It is difficult being a, a thoughtful Buddhist in America, in a Western society where, imagine raising a child, where that child will see a commercial on television for a Barbie doll. And that Barbie doll commercial ends. Child asks, "Can I have it?" Parent says no. Child cries. Well, there you go. Right there. That is the idea that, oh, I want this thing. I can't have it. So I feel a certain way. That's different for everyone. But it's an issue.
Yeah.
It's a real issue. When is enough for stuff? I mean, do we have enough stuff? Like,
Mm.
really? Do, do we need an iPhone 17? I mean,
Right.
yeah, yeah. So it's tough. It's tough, but everyone. We all have our own challenges in life, and for me, I want to see people be happy, be peaceful, and treat each other well. So, whatever I can do to help stir that pot, I'm more than happy to do so. Chambers, thank you so much again for having me on your YouTube channel. This has been a real delight, real pleasure.
Well, absolutely. And you're always welcome if you want to dive deeply into, like, say, a single concept or something like that down the road. I'd be more than happy to shoot the breeze with you and just have good, healthy, beneficial dialogue. Absolutely. I'd be more than welcome to it. It was a very pleasure having you today. And I've learned some new things. And I think that we've deepened our friendship as well. So I'm very grateful.
Certainly. I just want to just say, not all Buddhists are the same, right? Some of them do commit crimes, for example. So I like to think of myself as a Buddhist who is an ambassador who tries to spread the good word that we're trying to make the world a better place, one piece of litter picked up at a time, quite frankly. But no, the reason, but I really want to say though here at the end though is I am so thankful as I consider myself an ambassador of Buddhism. Saying this, I am so thankful that you found Catholicism. It doesn't have to be Buddhism. I just wherever I want it to be a healthy place, of course, but wherever people can find, I don't know if the right word is solace, but some kind of for their soul, right? To just feel at peace, like they belong as part of the human race. Quite frankly, that we're all humans, we're all made from the same stuff. We're all going to the same place, if you ask me. Wherever, wherever the universe, pretty much, into the universe we go, wherever that is. Um, I'm glad. I'm so thankful that you found Catholicism though in your life. That it has been so helpful for you, and I just wish that upon all your viewers, listeners, that wherever life takes them, that I hope it's as good a path as possible. Right? Yeah. And nothing but love. Much love to everybody out there. Thank you for listening.
Sure. Thank you so much.